Hello there, welcome to session 14 where we're going to be looking at substance-related bereavement. Now perhaps you've tuned into this video because you're concerned about the possibility of your loved one dying, and many family members are concerned about somebody dying when they get into difficulty with their substance use. However, most people who do get into difficulty don't actually die. And then sadly there are those who do die as a result of their substance use. And perhaps you are bereaved and that's your reason for tuning into this particular video. In which case I'd like to say on behalf of Adfam that we're sorry for your loss and that these can be very difficult bereavements. So therefore we thought it was important that we had a session just for you. Now I'm going to be coming on and sharing some general information about substance-related bereavements, and you'll need to decide for yourself how much, if any, of it applies to the situation that you find yourself in. In a moment I'll come on and share with you a model that explains some of the complexity of these bereavements, but also suggests what the needs are of bereaved people so that they can move through their bereavement. And then I'll come on at the end and share with you some further sources of support for those people who are bereaved through a substance-related death. Okay, let's make a start. Substance-related bereavements can be severe, complex and long-lasting. And it's important to be able to make sense of that because it helps to understand how to grieve more effectively and to move through these bereavements. So with that in mind, I'm going to come on now and share with you a slide of a model that shows the characteristics of substance-related bereavements. What the model shows us is that there are 5 interconnected substance-related characteristics that may affect someone's bereavement. I'll briefly say what those are and then I'll take each one in turn and say a bit more about it. These characteristics are substance use itself, the actual death, coping with specific difficulties, stigma, disenfranchised grief and a lack of social support, and unfinished business with the person who died. And notice how each of those 5 characteristics is connected to each other. This is because each characteristic is affected by the others, and in turn it also affects them too. And this begins to explain why these bereavements can be complex, severe and long-lasting. Let's take the first of these characteristics, substance use. Often bereaved people have a poor understanding of the nature of substance use, and particularly where it's addictive. And through their poor understanding of substance use, this can lead to difficulties in grieving the death and for unfinished business with the person who died, such as believing that you could have stopped them from dying or stopped them from using. Let's come on now and think about the actual death. Sadly, these deaths are often distressing. There's often unexplained aspects of the death. And because these deaths can be sudden, unexpected and distressing, it can lead to what's called traumatic bereavement, where someone is traumatized as well as bereaved. Coming on round to that next set of characteristics, coping with specific difficulties. Unlike many other bereavements, these often seem to be severe because of all these characteristics and the complexities. But also often they involve dealing with official procedures, such as maybe the police have been involved, there may be an autopsy, an inquest, possibly a court case as well. And then finally there can be intrusion by the media. Coming on round, as we have seen in previous sessions, there can be a stigma around substance use, and that can extend to substance-related bereavements too. And that can result in this phenomenon called disenfranchised grief, which is where society doesn't recognise and validate the full enormity of somebody's loss. And through doing that, someone thereby can lose the support of their social network, who don't understand and who maybe stigmatise the person who's died. Having a lack of social support whilst grieving can make bereavement harder. And then lastly, when somebody dies through a substance-related death, often there's what I've referred to here as unfinished business with the person who died. This can be all those things that were done or said before they died, or that maybe occurred actually during the death, that somehow feel unfinished or unresolved in some way. So some examples of this might be that you miss someone terribly because they were a loved one, but also you feared them and you were very angry with them because perhaps you were on the receiving end of domestic abuse from them. And then a key characteristic of these bereavements is feeling guilty, such as for not being able to stop somebody using or not stopping them dying. And as I've said, it's not possible to make somebody stop using, and often it's not possible to have stopped them from dying either. But that doesn't stop people from feeling guilty, and that guilt then needs to be worked through. Now, I'd just like to say a little bit more about how these 5 sets of characteristics are interconnected. Notice that if someone misunderstands addictive substance use and believes that the person who was using could have stopped easily, or maybe the bereaved person believes that they could have stopped the person from using, that means they're more likely to find the death upsetting and distressing because they couldn't stop it, or the person who was using didn't just stop using. Likewise, it probably means there's more unfinished business because someone's under the misapprehension that the person who was using, who died, could have easily have stopped their addictive substance use. By misunderstanding addiction, there's the possibility that someone may stigmatise themselves. And then where someone did die through their addictive substance use, there is an increased possibility of having to cope with specific difficulties, such as the need for an autopsy and an inquest into the death. So notice how a poor understanding of substance use can lead to increased difficulty with the other 4 characteristics. Okay, I'd like to come on and make some further comments about that model and the characteristics of substance-related bereavements, and to say something about the needs that are associated with those characteristics, needs that can be met through grieving effectively. First of all, substance-related deaths happen in many ways, not just through overdoses, but also accidental deaths, such as through drink driving. Also through suicide, where there seems to be a link with addiction, as if someone feels so trapped and miserable in their addiction that the only way they can see to get out of it is to end their life. And then there can be deaths through long-term health complications as a result of substance use that are often a characteristic of alcohol-related deaths. Now, each of those 5 sets of characteristics can be seen as needs. And these are needs that can be met through successfully grieving, which may involve professional help, such as a bereavement counsellor. Let me just give you some examples of what I'm talking about. That first set of characteristics up the top, substance use, can be seen as a need to understand substance use and to make sense of it, and particularly where it's addictive. The death itself can be seen as a need to understand and make sense of what happened, and that's often an important part of grieving. Coping with specific difficulties, that can maybe be seen as a need to be informed about processes such as an autopsy, an inquest, or a court case, and a need for support to go through those because they can be difficult and stressful experiences. Likewise, the set of characteristics around stigma and disenfranchised grief can be seen as a need for sources of support beyond maybe those people who stigmatise or disenfranchise you. Can be seen as a need to cope with shame. And then lastly, unfinished business. that can be seen as a need to work through unfinished business and to resolve it as much as we're able to. And that can include working with guilt, which is often a key characteristic of these bereavements and can be very difficult to work through and require professional help. The next point I'd like to make is some of those characteristics might be difficult for you to recognise, such as it may not be possible to know for yourself whether you're traumatised by the death as well as being bereaved. And if you are concerned about yourself, then see your GP or see a bereavement counsellor. Also, it might seem to you that some of those characteristics are inexplicable or can't be resolved now, and you're just stuck in that really unsatisfactory place of never knowing or never being able to resolve what truly happened. In which case, again, I want to encourage you to go to a bereavement counsellor who will have ways of working with those difficulties to help you move through them as much as we're able to. And lastly, I'd like to encourage you to get further support with your bereavement if you feel the need for it. And there are 3 ways that I'm going to propose for you to do that. Firstly is to look on your local council's website for a bereavement service in your area. Often that's Crew's Bereavement Care, but it may be a different agency. Secondly, there's the national charity Drug Fam, not Adfam, but Drug Fam. They provide services for people who are bereaved through a substance-related death. And then lastly, as ever, I'd like to encourage you to look elsewhere on the Adfam website for sources of support in your area. Okay, take care and bye for now.